The blade sang, not metaphorically, not in the poetic way the Then star singers described beauty in their ceremonial chants. The weapon physically emitted a frequency that made Krelvax's secondary hearing organs ache, a resonance that seemed to exist in dimensions his species had never evolved to perceive. He held it carefully in his four-fingered grip, rotating it under the cold light of his examination chamber. The metal caught the illumination and threw it back in ripples, as if the steel itself contained liquid starlight frozen mid-flow. Impossible patterns swirled across its surface, waves within waves, forming a hypnotic cascade that hurt to observe for too long. "Provenance?" asked Thurn, his apprentice, mandibles clicking nervously. "Salvage hauler found it in the forgotten spiral," Krelvax replied, not looking up from the blade. "Inside a vessel so old, it predates the Unification Wars. The ship's hull had degraded to dust, but this—" He ran a scanner across the metal's surface. The device whined, spat contradictory data, then simply shut down. "This remains perfect." Thurn's eye stalks retracted slightly. "The forgotten spiral, where the myths say, where fools say the first makers dwelt before they ascended or died, or whatever nonsense the religious castes preach." Krelvax set the blade down on the examination table. "But myths don't forge weapons that exceed our best military-grade alloys. Myths don't create folding patterns in steel that our quantum microscopes can't replicate." "Then what does?" Krelvax's throat sac pulsed, the Then equivalent of a troubled sigh. "That's what I intend to ask the Galactic Forge Council." The council convened 3 solar cycles later on Terminus Station, a neutral ground where the galaxy's master craftsmen gathered to share techniques and settle disputes. The chamber was arranged in concentric circles, with representatives from 47 species present. Krelvax stood at the center, the mysterious blade laid across a display pedestal that rotated slowly, catching light from every angle. "Colleagues," he began, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustic crystals, "I present to you an impossibility." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. A Klaxian smith, a species renowned for working metals in zero-gravity forges, leaned forward with 3 of her 8 eyes. "Impressive craftsmanship, Krelvax, but hardly impossible. I see folded steel, perhaps 100 layers." 7,312 layers, Krelvax corrected. "And that's a conservative estimate. Our scanners fail to penetrate the deeper structures. The carbon distribution is perfect, not approximately perfect, not within acceptable tolerances, absolutely perfect throughout the entire blade. The edge maintains molecular sharpness, despite the weapon being, according to radiometric dating, at least 12,000 standard years old." The chamber fell silent. 12,000? The voice came from Vex Thoril, a crystalline being whose species had been forging weapons since before most others had discovered fire. "That predates our oldest techniques by millennia. You're suggesting some lost civilization." "I'm not suggesting anything," Krelvax interrupted. "I'm showing you something that exists but shouldn't. Something that violates our understanding of metallurgical degradation, of oxidation, of entropy itself." A Horvan engineer, his rocky carapace clicking as he shifted his massive bulk, rumbled his skepticism. "Then it's not steel, some exotic alloy perhaps, or a sophisticated fake designed to confound our instruments." "I've tested it," Krelvax said flatly. "I've subjected it to temperatures that should have reduced it to slag. I've struck it with hammers that could dent starship hulls. I've left it in corrosive solutions that dissolve our best ceramics. It remains unchanged. This is steel, iron and carbon, the simplest of alloys, elevated to perfection through a method we cannot comprehend." "Then where did it come from?" demanded the Klaxian. Krelvax's throat sac pulsed again. "According to the star singers and their ancient texts, from Terra, from the first makers." "From laughter." It started with one delegate, then spread like contagion through the chamber. Even dignified representatives who normally maintain perfect composure allowed themselves amused clicks, chirps, and rumbles. Terra, someone shouted. Next, you'll tell us the blade was forged by the gods themselves. The first makers are mythology, Vexus Thorol said, though his crystalline structure flickered with what might have been uncertainty. Star songs and religious texts aren't evidence, Krelvax. Every civilization has its creation myths, its stories of ancient masters who came before. But we are the masters now. We are the pinnacle of galactic metallurgy. If this blade exists, and I don't doubt your analysis, then it was created by someone using technology we haven't yet discovered, not by mythical beings from a planet that doesn't appear on any star chart. Krelvax opened his mouth to respond, but another voice cut through the chamber. My Uncle Torrich makes these on weekends. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ in the room turned toward the speaker. She stood near the back of the observation gallery, a diminutive figure that most had probably assumed was someone's assistant or student. Her species was unfamiliar to Krelvax, bipedal, smooth-skinned, with bilateral symmetry and forward-facing eyes that suggested a predator's evolution. She wore the simple work clothes of a salvager, stained with engine grease and cosmic dust. "Excuse me?" Krelvax managed. The young female descended the gallery steps with casual confidence, her movements fluid in the station's standard gravity. "Damascus steel," she said, pointing at the blade. "That's what we call it." Well, technically, Damascus is a technique that creates similar patterns, but the ancient stuff from Syria used Wootz steel, which is a little different, but the principle's the same. My Uncle Torrich is a hobbyist blacksmith. He makes knives like this for fun, sells them at craft fairs sometimes. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Vexus Thorol's voice cut through it like crystal scraping stone. "Who are you?" "Miyenne." She reached the central pedestal and examined the blade with the air of someone appraising produce at a market. "And this is a nice piece, don't get me wrong. Excellent pattern control, though if I'm being honest, the differential hardening could be better. See here?" She pointed to a section near the hilt. "The transition line isn't quite where it should be. Still functional, obviously, but Uncle Torrich would have reforged it." Krelvax felt his respiratory system constrict. "You're claiming your uncle creates weapons of this caliber as a recreational activity?" "Yep," Miyenne grinned, revealing flat teeth with pronounced canines. "Has a forge in his garage. Does it old school too? No power hammers, no computer-controlled heat treatment, just coal, iron, and a lot of patience. Takes him maybe a week to finish a blade, working a few hours each evening." "Lies," the Horvan engineer growled. "Impossible lies." "Is it?" Miyenne's eyes, a striking shade of brown that seemed to contain gold flecks, fixed on the engineer. "You said yourself that you can't figure out how it was made. Did it occur to you that maybe you've been overthinking it? That maybe the answer isn't some lost super technology, but rather a really, really good application of basic principles?" "Basic?" The Klaxian smith's voice rose to a pitch that rattled the acoustic crystals. "There is nothing basic about 7,000 layers of perfectly distributed carbon." "Sure there is," Miyenne said. "You fold the steel, heat it, hammer it flat, fold it over, heat it again. Keep doing that. Every fold doubles the layers. Fold it 12 times, you get over 4,000 layers. 13 times, over 8,000. The trick isn't the folding. It's controlling the heat, managing the carbon content, knowing when to work the metal and when to let it rest. It's a skill. Takes years to master, but it's just a skill." Krelvax found his voice. "You're describing manual labor, physical manipulation without molecular arrangers or quantum stabilizers." "Yeah, that's blacksmithing." "That's primitive," Miyenne's grin widened. "That's human." The word hung in the air like a grenade with an uncertain detonation timer. "Human," Vex Thorol repeated slowly. "You claim to be from Terra. I claim to be from Earth, which I'm guessing is your Terra. And before you ask, no, I won't tell you where it is. Humanity decided a long time ago that we'd explore the galaxy quietly, learn about our neighbors before making a formal introduction. I've been living on Then Prime for 3 years, working salvage, keeping my head down. Until now, Krelvax observed. Until now, Miyenne agreed. Because watching you all lose your minds over a knife my uncle could forge in his suburban garage is pretty funny, and also a little sad. She picked up the blade. Several council members gasped at her audacity and tested its balance with practiced ease. You've built civilizations that span solar systems. You've mastered faster-than-light travel, artificial gravity, energy weapons, but you've forgotten, or maybe never learned, that sometimes the old ways work better. Sometimes patience and skill and understanding your materials beats quantum computing and molecular manipulation. Prove it, Krelvax said quietly. Miyenne looked at him. What? Prove it. If your uncle can create such a blade on weekends, if this is merely a human skill rather than lost technology, then demonstrate it. Here, now, before the council. The chamber erupted in voices, some supportive, others derisive, many simply confused. Miyenne stood at the center of it all, still holding the ancient blade, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. All right, but I'll need a proper forge, not your plasma cutters or molecular arrangers. I need fire, an anvil, hammers, tongs, and some decent steel stock. Can you provide that? Krelvax's throat sac pulsed rapidly. Excitement or anxiety, even he wasn't sure which. We can build you whatever primitive equipment you require. Then we have a deal. Miyenne handed the blade back to him. Fair warning, though, this takes time. Days, not hours. Damascus isn't fast. It's deliberate. The council can wait, Vexithorel interjected, his crystalline structure pulsing with light. If you fail, human, you will be exposed as a fraud and likely detained for wasting our time. And if I succeed? The crystalline being had no answer for that. 3 days later, the forge was ready. They'd built it in one of Terminus Station's cargo bays, a massive space normally used for loading mining equipment. Krelvax had supervised the construction personally, following Miyenne's specifications to the letter. A brick forge connected to ventilation systems that could handle coal smoke, an anvil made of solid steel, shaped according to ancient diagrams Miyenne had sketched, hammers of various sizes, tongs with different grip patterns, barrels of water and oil for quenching. It looked absurdly primitive, surrounded by the station's gleaming alloys and holographic displays. The council gathered to watch, along with hundreds of other beings who'd heard rumors of the spectacle. Security had to establish viewing boundaries to keep the crowd at a safe distance. Miyenne stood before the forge, wearing a heavy leather apron she'd fabricated from station materials. She'd pulled her dark hair back into a tight knot and wore protective eyewear, not the advanced photon-filtering visors the aliens used, but simple tinted glass. Steel stock, she said, and an attendant handed her several bars of metal. She examined each one, testing their weight, checking for imperfections. She selected 2 bars and set the others aside. These'll work. What are you making? Krelvax asked. A knife, smaller than a sword, easier to finish in the time we have. Uncle Torrich could do a sword, but that'd take a couple weeks, and I get the impression your council doesn't want to wait that long. She placed the steel bars into the forge and began working the bellows. The coal glowed orange, then yellow, then white-hot. The temperature in the immediate area rose noticeably. Several observers backed away from the heat. Miyenne waited, watching the steel, not checking instruments or monitors, just watching, her eyes tracking subtle color changes in the metal. Now, she whispered, and pulled the first bar from the forge with her tongs. The steel glowed brilliant orange. She laid it on the anvil and raised her hammer. The first strike rang through the cargo bay like a bell. She worked with methodical precision, each hammer blow placed deliberately. The steel flattened, lengthened, began to take shape. When the orange glow faded to red, she returned it to the forge, heated it again, and continued working. Hours passed. Miyenne didn't speak, didn't pause except to wipe sweat from her forehead. She heated and hammered the 2 bars separately, then placed them side by side in the forge. She's going to join them, someone in the crowd murmured. Miyenne pulled both bars out, laid them together on the anvil, and hammered them into a single piece. Sparks flew with each strike. The bars fused, became one. That's the beginning, Krelvax realized. She's creating the differential carbon content manually. She folded the steel, heated it, hammered it flat, folded it again. The process was hypnotic in its repetition, yet each cycle showed subtle variations, slight changes in temperature, different hammer techniques, adjustments to how she positioned the steel on the anvil. Day 1 ended with the steel folded 6 times. Day 2 continued the folding process. 64 layers became 128, then 256, then 512. The crowd grew larger. Some observers set up recording equipment. Others took bets on whether she would succeed. Miyenne ignored them all, focused entirely on the steel. On day 3, she reached the 13th fold and stopped. The steel had a subtle texture now, visible patterns beginning to emerge on its surface. She shaped it carefully, drawing out the blade's edge, tapering the spine, forming the tang that would accept a handle. Then came the crucial part. Heat treating, she announced to no one in particular. She coated the blade's spine with a thick mixture she'd prepared: clay, charcoal, and water. The edge remained bare. Differential hardening. The edge gets harder for sharpness. The spine stays softer for flexibility. That's how you make a blade that cuts through anything but doesn't shatter. She heated the blade, evenly, watching its color shift from black to red to orange to yellow. Critical temperature, she murmured. Right. There. She plunged the blade into the water barrel. The sound that erupted was like nothing Krelvax had ever heard. A scream, not of pain but of transformation. The metal shrieked as its molecular structure locked into place, as carbon atoms redistributed themselves into crystalline patterns perfected by sudden cooling. Steam exploded upward in a cloud that briefly obscured Miyenne from view. When it cleared, she stood holding the blade, water dripping from its length. The patterns were visible now, faint swirls running along the steel's surface like frozen water. But they weren't finished yet. Miyenne spent the next hours grinding the blade on stones of progressively finer grits, shaping the edge, smoothing the surfaces. Then she mixed an acid solution, vinegar and other compounds the chemistry team had provided, and carefully applied it to the steel. The blade darkened. When she wiped the acid away, the patterns emerged in full glory. Waves of lighter and darker steel flowed across the blade's surface like stormy seas captured in metal. Each layer was visible, distinct yet harmonious with its neighbors. The pattern seemed to shift and change as the light hit it from different angles, creating an optical illusion of depth and movement. Miyenne held it up for the council to see. No one spoke, no one moved. Finally, Vexithoral approached, his crystalline structure pulsing rapidly. "How?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "How is this possible?" "Practice," Miyenne said simply. "Knowledge passed down through generations. Understanding that metal isn't just a material, it's a partner. You listen to it, learn its language, work with it rather than forcing it to obey." She looked around at the gathered aliens, hundreds of species representing thousands of years of combined metallurgical advancement. "You've been using technology to bypass the learning process. That's not wrong, it's efficient. And efficiency matters. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that mastery isn't about the tools you use. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of what you're working with." Krelvax stepped forward, extending his hand. "May I?" Miyenne handed him the blade. It felt alive in his grip. The balance was perfect. The edge caught the light and split it into rainbows. He could see his own reflection distorted across the Damascus patterns, as if looking at himself through rippling water. "Your uncle," he said slowly, "makes these on weekends." "Yep." "As a hobby." "Yep." Krelvax's throat sac pulsed violently. He looked up at Miyenne, this small being from a species that shouldn't exist, from a planet that didn't appear on any chart. "What else can humans do?" Miyenne smiled, but there was something ancient in that expression, something that reminded Krelvax of the blade itself, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. That, she said softly, is an excellent question. The blade changed everything. Within hours of Miyenne's demonstration, the Galactic Forge Council erupted into factional chaos. Half the delegates demanded immediate access to Earth's location, insisting that humanity's metallurgical knowledge represented a strategic resource too valuable to remain isolated. The other half, led by Vexithorel, argued for caution, pointing out that a species capable of achieving material mastery without advanced technology might possess other capabilities the galaxy had underestimated. Krelvax watched it all from his quarters, monitoring the Council's communication channels while the blade Miyenne had forged sat on his desk, catching the dim light from his reading lamp. He'd run it through every test available on Terminus Station. The results were identical to the ancient blade from the Forgotten Spiral. Perfect carbon distribution, molecular level sharpness, flexibility that defied conventional understanding of steel's properties. She'd done it in 3 days. His door chime sounded. "Enter," he called. Miyenne stepped inside, no longer wearing her forge-stained work clothes. She'd cleaned up, dressed in the simple tunic and pants common among station residents. Without the soot and sweat of the forge, she looked even younger than before. Perhaps 25 standard years, though Krelvax had no idea if that meant the same thing for humans as it did for Then. "They're going to make a move," she said without preamble. "The military contingent. I overheard them planning in the commissary. They think I'm just a salvager with no connections, no protection, easy to detain quietly." Krelvax's throat sac contracted. "You're not surprised. I knew this would happen the moment I opened my mouth in the council chamber." She moved to his window, looking out at the stars beyond the station. "Humans have been watching the galactic community for almost 200 years. We've seen how you handle discoveries, how you react to strategic advantages. We knew that revealing ourselves would be complicated." "Then why did you?" Miyenne was quiet for a long moment. "Because I'm tired of hiding. Because watching your council declare impossible something my uncle does for relaxation made me realize how far apart our civilizations actually are. You've advanced in one direction, bigger ships, stronger weapons, faster computers. We advanced in a different direction first, deeper understanding, patient mastery, working with our hands and our minds together." She turned to face him. "Both paths are valid, but maybe it's time we learned from each other. The Council won't see it that way. They'll see a threat." "I know." Her brown gold eyes held his gaze steadily. "That's why I need to ask you something, Krelvax. Do you believe Terra, Earth, is real? Do you believe the old star songs weren't just mythology?" He looked at the Damascus blade on his desk. "After what I've witnessed, I'd be a fool not to." "Then you understand what I'm about to tell you is true, not a bluff." Miyenne crossed her arms, her posture shifting subtly into something more rigid, more military. "Humans have been forging Damascus steel for over 2,000 years. We figured out how to split atoms 75 years after we started using electricity. We went from first flight to walking on our moon in 66 years. We built the first quantum computer while still using fossil fuels for energy." She paused, letting the implications settle. "We're very good at taking simple principles and pushing them to their absolute limits." Krelvax felt his secondary hearts accelerate. "You're saying—" "I'm saying that if we could do this," she gestured at the blade, "before we ever left our planet, what do you think we can do now? What do you think 2 centuries of quietly observing galactic civilization has taught us? What advances do you think we've made while nobody was watching?" "You're threatening the Council." "No," Miyenne's voice was firm. "I'm providing context. There's a difference. Humans don't want war. We've had enough of those among ourselves to last several lifetimes. We don't want to conquer or dominate. We just want to be left alone to explore, learn, and occasionally make friends." Her expression softened slightly. but we also won't be bullied or detained or treated as a resource to be exploited. So when those military delegates come for me, and they will, I need you to make sure they understand what they're actually risking." Before Krelvax could respond, his communication console chimed urgently. He activated it, and Vexathoral's crystalline face appeared in the holographic display. "Krelvax, is the human with you?" "Yes. Keep her there. The council has voted. We're placing her in protective custody pending negotiations with her government. Security teams are en route to your location." Miyenne laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Protective custody? That's a creative term for kidnapping." Vexathoral's structure flared with light. "You revealed yourself to us, human. You demonstrated capabilities that could shift the balance of power in this galaxy. Did you think there would be no consequences?" "I thought you might be wiser than this," Miyenne replied. "I thought the council might recognize an extended hand instead of treating it like a threat. Wisdom is understanding when something is too dangerous to ignore." The console went dark. Krelvax's door locks engaged with a heavy clunk, sealed from the outside. "Well," Miyenne said calmly, "that's unfortunate." Krelvax moved to his weapons locker, pulling out a plasma cutter. "I won't let them take you." "I appreciate that, but it won't help." She held up her hand, showing a small device attached to her wrist, something Krelvax had assumed was a simple chronometer. "This is a transmitter. Has been since I arrived on the station. Everything that happened in the forge, every word spoken in the council chamber, it's all been broadcast on a frequency you don't monitor because you don't know it exists." "Broadcast where?" "To the 17 other humans currently on Terminus Station, to the 43 humans on various ships docked here, to the observation post we maintain just outside the Forgotten Spiral." Her smile was grim. "And to Earth, though the message won't arrive there for another 6 months given the distance. We've been documenting first contact, Krelvax, making sure that if something goes wrong, humanity knows exactly what happened and who was responsible." The implications crashed through Krelvax's mind like a meteor shower. 60 humans, on this station alone. Living quietly, working jobs, learning languages, making friends. Some have been here for years, like me. Others cycle through on merchant vessels, gathering intelligence. She moved closer to him, her voice dropping. "You think you're detaining one salvager. You're actually picking a fight with a species that's been preparing for this moment for 2 centuries." Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, heavy, synchronized, military, multiple individuals in combat armor. "Last chance to walk away," Miyenne called out, her voice carrying through the door. "Go back to the council. Tell them you want to negotiate instead of threaten." The door exploded inward. Not opened, exploded. Someone had used a breaching charge, reducing the reinforced alloy to shrapnel. 6 security officers stormed through, weapons drawn, targeting scanners sweeping the room. They found it empty. Krelvax and Miyenne had moved the instant she'd finished speaking, slipping into the maintenance access tunnel behind his weapon locker. The passage was narrow, designed for small repair drones, but both of them managed to squeeze through. "How did you know about this tunnel?" Krelvax hissed as they crawled through darkness. "I've had 3 years to map this station," Miyenne whispered back. "I know 17 different routes to the docking bays, 11 ways to access life support systems, and 6 completely unmonitored areas where someone could hide indefinitely." She paused at an intersection, listening. "Left here. We're heading for Bay 7. "Why Bay 7? "Because that's where my ship is docked. Well, technically, it's registered as a Then cargo hauler. But underneath the fake transponder and hull modifications, it's human-built, and it's fast, very fast." They emerged from the maintenance tunnels into a service corridor. Alarms were blaring throughout the station now. Lockdown protocols engaging, bulkhead doors sealing. The council wasn't taking chances. Miyenne moved with practiced efficiency, navigating through the chaos as if she'd rehearsed this exact scenario. They passed terrified civilians, confused merchants, and twice had to hide while security patrols rushed past. Bay 7's entrance was guarded. Two Horvan soldiers stood at the access point, their rocky carapaces gleaming under the emergency lights. They were massive, each one easily 3 times Miyenne's mass. Their weapons could punch through starship hulls. "Can't fight our way past," Krelvax muttered. "Don't need to." Miyenne activated her wrist device, entering a complex sequence. "Watch." The lights in Bay 7 cut out. Both guards immediately moved toward the bay entrance, following their training. Investigate the power failure, secure the valuable ships inside. The moment they passed through the doorway, Miyenne and Krelvax sprinted across the corridor and slipped into the bay through the still open access point. "Power's fine in here," Krelvax observed. "I know. I just told the bay's computer to turn off the lights." Miyenne grinned. "Humans wrote most of the security protocols you're using. We know all the back doors." Her ship was a nondescript cargo hauler, battered and worn like any vessel that spent its life in the salvage trade. But as they climbed aboard and Miyenne activated the engines, Krelvax heard a hum that no standard cargo vessel should produce, a deep, powerful resonance that spoke of military-grade power systems. "Strap in," Miyenne ordered, sliding into the pilot's seat. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. "This is going to be rough. The station won't let us launch. The docking clamps." The ship lurched upward, tearing free from its moorings with a screech of protesting metal. Alarms shrieked. The bay doors were closed, massive slabs of reinforced alloy designed to withstand everything short of a direct missile strike. Miyenne didn't slow down. "Hold on to something," she said, her voice eerily calm. The ship's forward weapons, definitely not standard for a cargo hauler, fired. Not plasma cutters or energy beams, but something else. Krelvax's instruments registered massive kinetic projectiles, accelerated to absurd velocities. Railguns. Humans had mounted railguns on a salvage vessel. The bay doors exploded outward, shredded by hypersonic tungsten slugs. The ship shot through the gap into the void beyond Terminus Station. Behind them, pursuit vessels launched. Military interceptors, faster and more maneuverable than any cargo ship should be able to evade. Miyenne's fingers danced across her controls. The ship jinked left, rolled right, dove below the station's ecliptic plane. Weapons fire streaked past, plasma bolts that would have vaporized them if any had connected. "They're hurting us," Krelvax realized, "pushing us away from jump points." "I know." Miyenne's eyes were locked on her displays. "They're also running predictive algorithms, trying to anticipate my moves based on standard evasion patterns." And humans don't fly using standard evasion patterns. She cut the main engines. The ship continued forward on momentum while the pursuing interceptors shot past, their automated systems not accounting for a pilot insane enough to kill thrust during combat. Before they could correct, Miyenne fired maneuvering thrusters in a sequence that shouldn't have been possible, the kind of vector changes that would paste most pilots against their bulkheads. Krelvax's vision grayed at the edges from the G-forces. The ship spun, oriented, and fired again. 3 interceptors died before they realized they'd been outmaneuvered. "Jump point in 20 seconds, Miyenne announced. "We're not heading for standard routes. I've got coordinates for a path nobody knows exists." "Impossible. Every jump point in this sector has been mapped for centuries." "By your people, sure. We've been here 200 years, remember? We found some you missed." The remaining interceptors were catching up, weapons hot, preparing to fire. Krelvax watched the tactical display with growing horror. Even if they reached the jump point, they'd be hit before the FTL drive could engage. "Miyenne, trust me." The ship hit the jump coordinates. Space twisted, reality bent, and Krelvax experienced the familiar yet always disturbing sensation of traveling faster than light. When they emerged, they weren't in the forgotten spiral. They were somewhere else entirely. Krelvax stared at his navigational console in disbelief. According to every star chart he had, this region of space didn't exist. Or rather, it existed, but it was marked as an unexplored nebula, too much interference for reliable jumps, too dangerous for casual exploration. Welcome to the Veil, Miyenne said, her voice carrying a note of pride. One of 17 hidden zones humanity has mapped, good places to disappear when you need to think. The nebula was beautiful, clouds of ionized gas glowing in shades of purple and gold, lit from within by young stars. And nestled among those clouds, nearly invisible against the background radiation, were structures, human structures. Space stations, observation posts, and what looked like an entire shipyard. "How many of you are out here?" Krelvax breathed. "Enough!" Miyenne leaned back in her seat, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "We're not conquerors, Krelvax. We're explorers. But we're also survivors. We learned a long time ago that the galaxy can be a dangerous place, so we prepared. We built networks, established safe havens, developed technologies that nobody else was working on because they seemed too primitive or too impractical." She gestured at the Damascus blade, which she'd somehow managed to grab during their escape. "Like this. Your people abandoned hand forging because molecular arrangers were faster, but faster isn't always better. Sometimes slow and deliberate produces results that advanced technology can't match. The Council will never stop searching for you, for Earth. Let them search." Miyenne smiled. "Earth isn't in any database you have access to. It's not near any major trade routes. We've been very careful about that. And even if they found it, what would they do? Invade a planet they know almost nothing about, with a population that's proven surprisingly good at improvising?" Krelvax thought about Damascus steel forged in a garage, about railguns hidden on salvage vessels, about 60 humans living undetected on a major galactic hub for years, about 2 centuries of quiet observation and preparation. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "The same thing I've always wanted. To be left alone, to explore, to learn." Miyenne looked at him directly, but also maybe to teach. "Your council was right about one thing. Humans do have knowledge worth sharing, not just metallurgy. We've gotten very good at biology, at chemistry, at understanding complex systems without relying on computers to do the thinking for us. We could offer that to the galactic community, but only if they're willing to treat us as equals, not as resources to be exploited or threats to be contained." "I can't speak for the council." "No, but you can speak to them. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them that the first makers aren't a myth, we're real, and we've been here all along, watching and waiting. Tell them that we're offering friendship, but we're not begging for it. We'll survive either way." Krelvax looked out at the hidden shipyard, at the evidence of humanity's patient, methodical expansion into a galaxy that didn't know they existed. He thought about the star songs, the ancient texts that spoke of beings who mastered matter before they mastered stars. Warnings, not legends. "They won't believe me," he said. "Then show them this." Miyenne handed him her newly forged Damascus blade. "Tell them one human made it in 3 days. Tell them there are billions more of us, most of whom have spent their entire lives getting very, very good at whatever they do. Tell them we've been preparing for this moment since before their grandparents were born." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "And tell them my Uncle Torrich says hello. He'll be happy to know his hobby started an interstellar incident." 3 weeks later, Krelvax stood before the Galactic Forge Council once more. The chamber was packed, word of the human escape had spread throughout the station, and everyone wanted to hear what would happen next. He'd spent those weeks analyzing everything he'd seen, everything he'd learned. He'd studied the blade Miyenne had given him, comparing it to ancient texts and star songs. He'd traced humanity's hidden presence throughout the galaxy, finding evidence of them in dozens of locations once he knew what to look for. The first makers weren't gone. They'd never left. They'd just been very, very patient. "Colleagues," Krelvax began, his voice steady despite his racing hearts, "I return to you with a recommendation, not a warning, not a threat, but a simple suggestion born from observation and evidence." He held up the Damascus blade where everyone could see it. "Leave them alone. The chamber erupted in protests. Vexithoral's crystalline structure flared with indignant light. "Leave them alone. They've been operating covertly in our space for centuries. They have technology we don't understand. They represent, Krelvax interrupted, his voice cutting through the noise. Exactly what the ancient texts warned us about. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but masters who achieved perfection through patience rather than power, who learned to work with matter, with biology, with the fundamental forces of reality before they ever left their world, who've spent 200 years watching us, learning from us, and preparing." He set the blade on the central pedestal, letting it catch the light. "This is what one human can do in 3 days with fire and hammer. Imagine what billions can do with 2 centuries of preparation. Imagine what weapons they've built while we weren't watching, what strategies they've developed, what alliances they've formed among the species we've overlooked or dismissed." Silence fell across the chamber. "We have a choice," Krelvax continued. "We can treat humanity as a threat and spend the next century searching for a planet we'll probably never find, fighting enemies we can't see, and potentially starting a war with beings who've proven exceptionally good at surviving and adapting. Or," he paused, letting the weight of his next words settle, "or we can accept the hand they've extended, learn from them as they've learned from us. Trade knowledge and techniques, understand that mastery comes in many forms, and perhaps our technologies and their crafts could complement each other. Build something together rather than destroying each other." Vexithoral approached the pedestal, examining the Damascus blade with eyes that now held something other than suspicion. "You believe they would accept peace after we tried to detain one of them?" "I believe," Krelvax said carefully, "that they understand we acted from fear rather than malice, and I believe they're wise enough to forgive first contact mistakes, provided we don't repeat them." The crystalline being picked up the blade, light refracting through his structure and dancing across the Damascus patterns. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "The star songs speak of the first makers as beings who shaped reality through will and patience, who built wonders that would outlast civilizations, who left behind artifacts that would teach those who came after." He looked up at the assembled council. "Perhaps we've been reading those songs wrong. Perhaps they weren't describing gods or ancient masters who died. Perhaps they were describing humanity, and the artifacts they left were lessons, tests to see if we were wise enough to recognize mastery when we saw it." He set the blade down gently. "I propose we send an envoy to negotiate peaceful contact. No demands, no threats, just an honest offer of dialogue and exchange." The vote was close, but it passed. 6 months later, Krelvax received a message on a frequency that shouldn't have existed. The transmission included coordinates and a simple invitation. "Come visit. Bring friends. Uncle Torrich wants to show you his latest project. He's been working on pattern-welded steel. You'll love it." Krelvax looked at his star charts, at the region marked as the Forgotten Spiral, and smiled with his throat sack. Terra was real. Humanity was real, and somewhere in the galaxy, a hobbyist blacksmith was forging wonders in his garage, completely unaware that he'd helped prevent an interstellar war. The old star songs had been right all along. The first makers hadn't disappeared. They'd just been waiting for the rest of the galaxy to catch up. And maybe, Krelvax thought as he plotted his course, that was exactly what the universe needed. A reminder that sometimes the most advanced civilizations were the ones who never forgot the value of patience, craft, and working with your hands to create something beautiful and perfect. He picked up the Damascus blade one last time, watching the patterns flow like captured starlight. "See you soon, Uncle Torrich," he murmured. "I have many questions about your weekends."